Good morning, everyone. Good morning. First thing, I know the email that some of you saw and most of you wrote to me about. Sorry about that. That was a legitimate bug. What happened was I didn't sanitize my input because I wrote the code that would actually pull from column C, 1, 2, 3, and so on, right? And somebody who had left the class ended up with, shall we say, non-sanitized input, and it ended up sending them 1,000 email messages. Sorry, that was legitimately a bug, and it's going to take me probably a day to recover from it because it used up all my budget. But bugs happen. Sorry, my mistake. Anyway, if you look at your assignment 1 and number 2, you should have comments from us. So everybody, even if you don't have a grade on your thing, it's because it's write protected. Don't write protect your file against us. We need to leave comments. So if you have one that you just don't understand, email me and we'll talk about it. Okay. Thing 2, this is where we are in the sequence of the course. This is week 7. This is class 17. And we have Andrea Dolan to talk to us today, which I'm very excited about. So I hope you are too. Remember, last week we had Peter Norvig give a lecture. And I forgot to mention that this paper by Emily Bender and friends on the dangers of stochastic pairs really is one you should read. It's worth it. You will find this referred to a lot in the days to come. Okay, so we'll talk about this in more detail in about 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. Today we have Andrea talking to us about AI for UX research, and I'll give her an intro in just a second. Next week is tomorrow is interfaces to AI systems that use various kinds of perceptual tools, and we'll talk about the final assignment. Okay, that's all tomorrow. So in the category of AI news you can use, I ran across this report from Anthropic, the people who do Claude, and they did this really interesting analysis. They took 1 million conversations, filtered them by various criteria, and threw out ones that were boring and interesting, uninteresting, or salacious and so forth. They ended up with 574,000 conversations. A person talking to Claude, asking it to do something. And they discovered that STEM students, science, technology, engineering, right, are all early adopters, no surprise. Computer science students are overrepresented, again, no surprise, and lower adoption by others. When you break down, look in their data and break down what their people are using it for, overwhelmingly it's creating content. Help me write that paper. Help me write that essay that Dan asked for, right? Not that any of you would do that, right? But that's the predominant case. Explaining and coding, creating code, that's the second big use case. And below that is data viz, creating charts, all that stuff, okay? So not a surprise again, but interesting to see that when you go in and break it down, a lot of it is debugging C++ programs. Imagine my surprise, right? In the business context, you see a lot of people asking help for concepts. Explain this concept to me, and you get other kinds of things there. So you can take a look at these slides later. I have one more slide after this because this breakdown is interesting. If you build a 2x2 chart for these use cases, you get problem solving as a vertical dimension, output creation, and then you get direct, where people are directly asking for answers or for creating some particular kind of content, versus collaborative, where you go back and forth with Claude, using the AI agent as a collaborator to help you solve some kind of problem. So I found that really interesting because this breaks down into basically 4 equally distributed use cases. So roughly 25% each bucket. So this is an interesting analysis, and take note of that because they used a combination of human and AI support to develop this analysis. That leads me to introduce our speaker for today. That's the same thing I just said. My friend and colleague, Andrea Dolan, I've known for, let's say, a couple decades now. You may not remember this, Andrea, but we met like my second week at Google. So
no, we met our very first day, Dan. We started on the same day.
Yes. So it's been 20 years since we've been working together. So I'm just going to jump out of this and pop over to the meeting and present it. So you can now see, there's Andrea. Present.
Hello.
And I'm going to say the entire screen. That one.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. You're supposed to say hello.
Can you see and hear me okay?
Yeah.
Just mic check. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just introduce an introduction to myself. Dan and I, like he said, go way back. I've been working for about 20 years in the industry as a UXR and was in academia for a little while before that. I spent 18 of those years at Google. I currently teach a class at UC Santa Cruz, University of California, Santa Cruz, in HCI, in AI class. And I taught a lot of classes at Google in UX research. My background is I came from Carnegie Mellon's HCI Institute, and I am a research methods nerd. So my approach to AI has always been, and machine learning techniques has always been, how can I innovate? How can I expand research methodologies and best practices in research? How can I how can I approach them from a methodological perspective? So that's my angle, if you will. And I just love incorporating new tools and new approaches and innovating on methods. So with that, that's what I'm here to share with you today, is sort of what we've figured out so far as how to incorporate AI into UX research practices. So with that, make my slides go. Okay. We're going to learn how to leverage AI for UX research, and I'm super excited to be a guest lecturer here today with all of you. So first off, I just want to mention that HCI research has been using machine learning techniques for years, decades, really. It's machine learning is very powerful. The tools, include things like sentiment analysis and thematic clustering techniques and things. They've been around a long time. But the modern LLMs are very well suited to a number of UX research tasks and other tasks that we do as HCI researchers. So they're really good at finding patterns. They are excellent at analyzing data across data sources and synthesizing data for us. So that's really where we're going to focus on, a lot of what I'll focus on today. So there are a few things to consider when you are using AI for HCI purposes or research purposes. The first thing you want to make sure is that you have gotten informed consent appropriately covered with your users as you're collecting data. This does not mean you need to explicitly call out that you would be using AI tools for analysis, but you do want to make sure that they allow you to use third-party analysis tools. This is best practice because generally speaking, you're going to be using Microsoft, you're going to be using, Google Workspace, you're going to be using tools that are outside the company that you are operating under or the institution you're operating under. And whether those include AI tools or not, you want to make sure that they allow you to, that part of the informed consent is that process. You also need to be keeping in mind that the craft of high quality research is still vitally important. As you probably have all realized in your work in this class so far, it is garbage in, garbage out as far as training data, as far as data for analysis. If you don't have a high quality research underpinnings and the data you've collected isn't good and reliable, none of the findings that AI is going to generate from that raw data is going to be any better. So you want to be still thinking about best practices like reducing bias in your sampling, having good scripts if you're doing interviewing, and following best practices for interviewing. If you're doing something task-based, high quality tasks or prompts, same sort of things go. If you're doing something more like a survey, you want to make sure you're asking really, high quality questions, following best practices, not leading, etc. So that you have really good, solid, reliable data, because the AI is not going to do you any favors if your data isn't high quality to begin with. You also want to be using good data handling techniques. So that includes de-identifying your data set, stripping out things like personally identifiable information or sensitive information. Generally speaking, this means also minimizing data that you've collected. Only collect and store what you need in order to conduct your analysis. And sometimes that means thinking ahead during the study design component. As you're planning your study, think ahead to what kind of analysis you want to do, and only collect the attributes or variables that you need to include in your analysis, and be very intentional about that. You also want to be relying or limiting access to raw or underlying data. So don't share it with everybody on your team or in your work group. Like, think about access controls for raw data, things that contain PII. Once you have removed names, once you have removed things, then you can, and de-identify that data set, then it makes more sense to share it a little more broadly, but you still don't want to you still want to be very cautious. And you do want to be setting retention policies in your studies for raw data. So that means having a plan for how long you can keep that raw data, the underlying data that has all the PII in it, around, versus something that's more extracted, like video clips or a transcript or other things that have been processed in a way that removes some of the PII. All right. You also want to make sure that you're excluding your info from training data. That means you want to be very cautious about using personal or consumer versions of products, and you want to understand what the rules are, the terms and conditions are. For my own practice, my consultancy, I do use ChatGPT Teams in particular, because it's the way you can access some more of the SOC 2 compliance and other things, like excluding your data, a guarantee that your data is excluded from training data. So that's important to be aware of. You also want to be thinking a lot about institution, if you're working at the university, employer or client permission. You want to be thinking about what you have access, tools that you have access to, and you want to be thinking very carefully before trying any third-party tools to make sure that you are permitted by your institution, employer, or client to share files with that tool or with that company, especially if you're working with data that is confidential or proprietary. This is maybe less of an issue in academia, or a different kind of issue in academia. But if you are working for a company, they will care about data exfiltration, or they will care about what other companies in other places, any data that is useful or instrumental to them, maybe how it may be accessed, or other places it may be stored. Be especially wary if you're using personal or school accounts to access these tools. That is sort of a sign that maybe you should think twice, if you're not working at an institution, or it's not something that where it's your own data, and you're not operating on behalf of an institution, an employer, or a client. So just be aware of that as you're approaching this. All right. So with that, we're going to kind of go through a lot, and I like to structure it as the steps we go through as we're running a HCI study. So this should look familiar as a process. And we're just going to start with planning and run all the way through to reporting. So it's going to be a whirlwind, but hang in there. So as we go into the planning stages, one thing that I really enjoy is thinking about how AI can help with objective setting and planning for UX research. And to me, this means thinking a lot about what the study is going to be, what's the objective, what's the opportunity that you're going to, or the hypothesis that you're going to test. And so one approach is to explore and role play with an AI agent, an LLM. You give it the context and the information that you have about a topic, and then you ask it to identify what questions a particular stakeholder might have, or a team might have, or what's unanswered in this space. You can try to, if you've done research in this space, or this is your, you're familiar with the domain, try to answer the questions that it's proposing until you hit places where you don't have answers. Those are potential lines of research. You can also ask the AI to identify unanswered questions and research opportunities directly. So you can also role play. In the second example here, I say, you're a founder of a startup working on an app to support people in reaching their fitness goals. Your product has AI fitness recommendations and can also connect you with a personal trainer or coach via chat or video calls for accountability, workout planning, or an online workout session. What would you ask of your UX researcher after reading these reports? And these are reports that I conducted, studies I conducted for an open research project, so an open source research project. They didn't have, the client is hypothetical. So I made up this scenario. I gave it some detailed reports, and then it came back with some reasonable things that a startup founder may anticipate. That can be very helpful as you're coming up with ideas for suggesting for future research to clients, or just figuring out what should I work on next, to be a little more creative and take the initiative. In this case, what I really enjoyed was that the response that came from the LLM gave me questions. But what I did, the layer I added are the blue arrows. So it said, specific needs and preferences across demographics. That makes sense. And so then that's an opportunity to do segmentation, right? Or how culture. So the study I ran explored fitness perspectives and habits in the US, Mexico, the US, Brazil, and India. And so it was looking at some countries with different cultural and like social norms. And so understanding the cultural impacts of fitness goals and motivations, doing some more interviews in the countries of interest for this particular startup would be appropriate. Figuring out feature preferences, that's an opportunity for something more like a conjoint survey or a max diff survey, right? Then you also have other options as we go down the list, but you as a practitioner can look at these suggestions and think, oh, I could do this kind of study. I could do that kind of study. The methodology I would apply to answer this question or explore this topic is X. And it's not giving you the full answers. It's up to us to prioritize and know what's going to be useful. But it's an interesting way to generate these ideas and think ahead, because maybe you didn't think about how to motivate users to stay consistent, right? Maybe that wasn't something that was top of mind before, but now it's on your radar, and you're like, well, of course, if we're building an app, we want people to stay engaged and stay subscribed, right? Or whatever, use the product. So we should definitely be thinking about longitudinal studies. We should definitely thinking about motivational, what contributes to motivation. Switching topics a little bit, another thing you can do in that early stage planning is secondary research, lit reviews, things like that. You can ask an LLM, like Scholar GPT is great if you're looking for academic resources. There are tools like Elicit out there for finding papers. Notebook now has if you're familiar with Google Notebook LM, it's an excellent tool, and it now has a Find Me Sources button. So you can tell it what your topic you're looking for sources on, and it will source material for you. And really the workflow that you want to do is obtain the sources, vet the sources of that material, and then you can use that body of literature that you've collected, whether that's industry reports or academic reports, and you can synthesize and analyze that body of research like you would by hand, but you don't have to do it all by hand. You can do it facilitated or in collaboration with an LLM. In particular, I like Google Notebook for that activity. But ChatGPT, Claude, your preference will do as long as you can upload the sources. So I wanted to mention Google Notebook. How familiar is the class with Notebook, Dan?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay, I'm going to whirlwind through this, but just to get everyone up to speed, Notebook lets you create your own corpus and look at it with Gemini behind it. It allows you to upload 300 sources. That's a lot of sources. That's better than, token-wise, that's better than you can get with attachments in ChatGPT, unless you're paying for the big bucks. Or other tools have limits as well. In this case, you can ask Notebook to help you find sources with this Discover Sources link, or you can add sources of different types in these things down in these ways below. Notebook promises not to use the sources that you upload for training data. So you only have to worry about data exfiltration if it's an issue that your content is in Google's ecosystem or in Google Drive. You interact with it as an LLM, and and what I like in particular about it is it deep links to the references to the context and the specific part of a document that it's citing as its source for its reasoning or its rationale for its answer. And so I'll show you an example of that, but it's harder to get ChatGPT and Claude and others to do that. They may point to the document, but they won't point to the line. They won't point to the quote necessarily or as readily. And so this does it automatically. So this is an example of Notebook. You've uploaded your sources here. You can ask it to do something here. In this case, I've asked it to generate an executive presentation outline about what a business leader should know about online privacy according to these documents. These documents are a set of publications, academic, primarily publications about global privacy sentiment. And then you will get answers here, and you can add them. You can add them, save to note, and then those show up down here. Something that a lot of students enjoy is if you have like a topic that you want to familiarize yourself with, you can gather the resources, and then rather than reading all of the resources, you can actually have it generate a podcast that is not only synthesizing the content, but making a fake conversation between two AI generated voices. And then you can listen to that podcast and it's them discussing the topic. So if that's a format for content that is interesting to you, you could consider that as a different way of learning and see if it works for you. This is an example of the output that this generated. And what I want to show you are these little gray circles here. I know it's probably a little hard to see, but those little gray circles are all the citations. And when I click on one, it highlights, and it shows me the text. And then it also jumps to that text in the document. So I can see what came above and below and the context for the bit that it's quoting, so that I can feel confident that it's interpreting that context correctly and that I agree with its interpretation. An example of Notebook LM is that one I said with like role playing that you're the startup founder. What do you want to know? Right? We looked at that example. But that's like all in the planning stage. All of those things are things you can do in the planning stage. Then we get into study prep. This is when you know what you want to study. You have identified your hypothesis or your goals for the study. And now you're into like developing the study itself. So here for study prep, the first thing is it's really fast at generating discussion and guides or scripts for interviews, surveys, etc. It's not perfect. It is an assignment I have in my class that students use an LLM to generate a study plan, a study script, and then they have to find all the problems with it and fix them. And no one study gets out alive. they all have flaws. And so it's important to recognize that it's not perfect, but it is a place to get started and then apply your own expertise in interviewing and ethnographic research to improve the study interview. The one thing I will also note is it's always very optimistic about time. So if you want to run an hour-long interview, you tell it 45 minutes or 30 minutes, because if you tell it you have an hour, that study guide will be way too long. This is an example of a prompt that you could use. It's very detailed, and that is on purpose. You're going to tell it the goal of the study. You're going to tell it give it a role to play. You're going to tell it what specific format you want the output to be in. You're telling it the target audience of who you are wanting to interview, and then you also want the interview, what format or details about the interview format or the script that you would like back. So here, break it into time sections focused on background, goals, past behavior, and current challenges, and inform a jobs to be done framework, which is a form of output or a particular approach to research. And ChatGPT did a pretty good job. It's not perfect, but as an interview guide, it is pretty good. I would definitely say it's a place it gets you going, and it's faster than typing it. So that's one consideration. Another example here is you're an expert interviewer on sleep, and write a 2-hour focus group discussion. So if you're not super experienced in running focus groups, this is an opportunity, or whatever methodology that you want to apply. This is a way to scaffold your learning and see what the LLM would come up with, and then apply your own judgment from there. So in this case, it came up with quite a good example for a focus group. It had some different activities. Some of them are fun. Some of them are interesting. I probably wouldn't keep them all, but as a place to start, it's definitely inspiring and a way to get ideas for things or activities to include in something more like a focus group or a group moderated session. All right. In study planning, the other thing that you can use the LLMs for, if you haven't thought of this already, is artifact generation. Often we have ideas, we have concepts, and we can feel limited by needing someone with design expertise to draw a storyboard, or someone in the team to take the time to sketch the design interfaces, or design storyboards, or design something that illustrates a concept. You can ask an LLM to do that for you. In particular, I found Copilot to be my preferred one for this. Actually, I've been pleasantly surprised with what Copilot's image generation can do. In this case, this example is from Gemini. Of course, the text is atrocious, but as a concept, it's not terrible. If I wanted someone to respond to this idea, having an image can sometimes help them, help people understand it faster or at a different level, and that can help get more feedback than just a verbal description of an idea. So that's study prep. Then we get into data collection, and this is where we get into some fun stuff. So the obvious one is AI moderation. Who here is familiar with AI moderation or unmoderated studies? I can't quite see, you're all blurred.
No. Oh, blur. I forgot to blur. Yeah.
No?
Say nobody.
All right.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of tools out there in the last year or two that, rather than an unmoderated study, something like usertesting.com, where a user is online, they go to a website, they get text or verbal instructions to go perform a task. They're video recorded, usually their face and their screen as they perform that task. They're asked questions after the fact. There's no accountability. in an unmoderated study. So that means if someone doesn't really answer the question or only answers part of the question, there's no way to, your data is just a little crummier because of it. And what's really lovely with an AI moderated tool is it really raises the bar. You give it context for what you want, and this AI moderator, this AI interviewer will ask follow-up questions. It's very interesting. And there's many, like I said, the other benefits to this are it will conduct the interview in multiple languages based on an underlying script that is the same. So you actually get better validity. If you are not fluent in that other language and you were to hire a moderator or someone to conduct that study in another language, that individual may ask follow-ups in a different way than you, or they may probe on different topics than you. And so your data may diverge, and you don't know whether that's cultural, whether that's or if it's an artifact of the fact that you had different moderators. And so here you know that the moderator is the same because it's an AI agent. It's better for conducting shorter interviews, but it can conduct them all pretty much at the same time. So you can set this thing up, go to sleep, wake up, and have 50 interviews or more, as much as you want to pay for, right? Conducted. So it's much faster than conducting that yourself, where you are time limited by your own time and attention to do one at a time, and you can only do so many in a day. But what's nice is that the AI moderator, unlike an unmoderated study, responds to users' feedback, refers to past responses that this person has mentioned, and asks follow-ups appropriately based on your intentions and your study goals. So they're not all the same. They're not all the same level of quality, but they are really an interesting area. So this is an example of one called Voice Panel. And this is an example of where I gave it my objective. So I told it I want to run an unmoderated study, or in this case, AI moderated study on modern online consumer banking in the UK. Ideally, we gather input on the desired app features and what banking tasks people do frequently, additional context. Please probe on peer-to-peer transfers like Venmo and Zelle, and split the bill features, PayPal, etc. Expense sharing, the use of budgeting apps in particular that aren't necessarily banking apps, but are in that finance app realm, and subscription management apps, if people are using those, and also buy now, pay later services. I then give it this text where I gave it the questions that I think it auto suggested some of these questions, and I edited them. And then I ran it. And so here I'm going to try to switch and actually show you it running. And unfortunately, I would love to have one of you be interviewed, but I can't because of the AV situation we're on. So with that, let me present something else. And we're going to preview it. So here I'm going to do English, but I could ask to do it in French or Portuguese or Bahasa Indonesian, and it will translate everything and speak or provide text in that language. All right. So which UK banks do you currently use? We're going to pretend that I'm in the UK. I'm in the US. I use Lloyd's Bank, and I also have an account with Monzo. One is my own personal account, and the other one's my joint account that we use with my family. And the reason we have that one is because it's tied to our mortgage. And so it's with the bank that our mortgage is through. Monzo is my personal checking and like banking account, so that's more for my own purchases and just keeps my like personal savings and like one-off stuff. So I use that for stuff that isn't for family or isn't for the house. And so if it's coming out of that fund, those funds I don't have to worry about asking anyone for permission. If I want to buy expensive fancy shoes, I can. Versus the Lloyds Bank one is the joint family account, and that's where we pay the mortgage from it, and we buy groceries and things for the kids and all of that with that one. I cash checks, I check my balance, and I use Zelly to do funds transfers. All right, and I'm going to stop there. So did you notice that it asked me detailed follow-up questions based on what I said? You can't do that with an unmoderated study. And so you only get as much detail as the person volunteers based on the original question. Whereas here we got more probing for example, on how I'm using these different accounts. I didn't program that. If you look, it made up everything between what banks do you use and what are the top 3 tasks you perform. It did all of that on its own. It identified those opportunities to get that data, and it did so based on the objective and the additional context that I gave it. So,
hey, Andrea,
yes.
We've got a question from the audience.
Sure.
Shoot.
Can we specify our own follow-up questions in this? Like, I know what are the standard answers for question 1, and then I have my own follow-ups.
Could you hear that, Andrea?
In and out. Something about follow-ups and standard questions.
Can you program follow-up questions?
Yes,
Voice.
yeah. Can I program?
So you can disable probing in this tool. You can disable probing, let the AI decide whether to probe or do custom specific probing. And different tools have different features. So Outset is very comprehensive versus this is like pretty simplified, but still very works great. And then there's it depends on the interface. In this interface, this is how you would control that. So if I wanted to specifically probe on specific areas only, I would type that in here and give it that context. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. So that's an example of, in this case, an AI moderated study. And I also want to share a different example, which is a video of a UI test. So rather than doing a UI test, we're going to watch a video while we're here. And so I hope the audio plays for you. In the slides, this is linked and you can watch it. What this is a different app called Userology. This is actually their founder, Shrey, and I doing a demo. What he is demonstrating is that this is a Figma mock. So this is not live. This is a Figma mock. It is a task that he is demonstrating and performing. And as he goes through the task on this screen, he's thinking aloud. And this is where the AI is saying it has a little waveform, and it writes out the words that it's saying as it's speaking them. And the task was to do a split a payment across a couple friends. One of the things that he explores is he clicks on this icon. And why I like Userology better than some of the other tools is some of the other tools, the AI moderator's listening. Userology, the AI moderator's watching. they're actually using visual processing of the Figma mock layer by layer, element by element. And so in this example, he clicks this, pick this button, right? And goes, oh, it's not working. And the moderator jumps in, doesn't skip a beat, and says, oh, the photo upload feature isn't implemented in this prototype. No one told the AI moderator that that's a photo upload button. It looked at the layers of the Figma mock, saw that it was a camera with a plus on it, intuited what that feature would do, saw that it didn't have anything connected to it as an action in the prototype, and responded to the user saying, move along, that's not implemented. I just love that example. So they are quite sophisticated as far as what they can do for you. And there are trade-offs. It's not a perfect system. There are a lot of times and definitely reasons why you may not want to adopt or opt to do an AI moderated study. But there are times and reasons when you might. And so that is I wanted to bring that up as an option when it comes to data collection. I'm loving the brave new world that we're in. And let me bring us back to our presentation. So that was the video demo. Oh, oops. Oh, I see what it's doing. I want it to stop. How do I stop? It's running away without me. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. I clicked the link and it ran off without me. So anyway, this is how you set that up. You just give it the Figma prototype, tell it what to start and stop on, give it some, feed it the prototype, give it some information, feed it the tasks that you want, and it runs with it. Another example of a different tool is Outset. This is another AI moderated study. This is one I ran. This is that fitness study I mentioned. So I ran it in English in India, Hindi in India, Brazil and Portuguese in Brazil, and then in the US in English. And what I want to draw your attention to is the rapidity of my inputs, like how quickly I got all these answers. So this was the day I launched it. And I got a response at 11:13, a response at 12:22, and a response at 1:59 p.m. Boom, 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 right? And then my protocol, it was less popular. There were fewer people in Brazil in the respondent pool looking to take these sorts of tests, and so the things started slowed down 2 the next day and 1 the next day after that. But that's still very quick for online recruiting. And in the end, I got 49 responses in 3 days. It's not bad. A bunch are scrolled down below this. It gives you a little summary of each participant. I don't find those particularly helpful, but they're there. Yeah. The other thing.
Andrea, I
Yes.
just want to add color commentary. I mean, you
Please.
said something actually astounding. 49 user studies in 3 days,
Actually, that's just in Brazil.
just in Brazil. Even better. You did not.
Across all 3 studies, it was 150 in 3 days.
That,
In
those
3
are
languages.
numbers. Those are just incredible numbers.
Yeah, 3 languages in 3 days. 3 languages in 3 countries in 3 days. 150 participants.
I mean, if you do it by yourself, you're lucky to get 6 a day. Just to
If you
calibrate.
do 6 a day, your brain is toast.
Right.
At least my personal max is 4 before I start not making sense or remembering what I'm talking. I don't remember the 5th participant that day. So anyways, the other thing that's really more obvious is transcription, right? We're all aware of voice to text. Zoom and other video conferences provide transcription. Amazon actually has some great libraries for this as well. As far as data processing goes, this is a game changer and more modern than you may realize. Even 5 years ago, we were paying people to transcribe documents and to transcribe user videos. And there are still people doing that, but it is so much faster. If it's not always 100% accurate, but it is not bad. And there's a lot out there that can be done. Another example here is Notebook will actually do transcription for you if you upload an MP3 file. YouTube will transcribe things automatically if you upload videos there. Do not ever put private or confidential user videos, or frankly, any user testing videos on YouTube. I don't care if you have them listed as unlisted. They are still, like, privacy through anonymity is not privacy. Don't put anything in YouTube that you don't want to be public. Sorry. It's important you remember that. But you can upload use audio files like MP3s of your interviews directly to Notebook and skip the translation or skip the transcription feature in a third tool altogether and just go straight to Notebook will transcribe. It's not bad. So that's one quick way to get transcription for free if you have a Google account. Video analysis is also on the horizon. You can set a language for translation, browse through it, edit different insights, or look for different particular things like people, keywords, speech, sentiment. You can search for topics, keywords, or people like within a timeline. It's pretty cool stuff. The problem is that none of it's great yet. There's APIs that exist, but no one yet has built the right tool for doing great user study video analysis that I've found yet. There are ones that will give you the video and the transcription on the side, and then some analysis of the transcription, but not an analysis of the video. And that's the distinction. That's what I'm waiting for. Another thing you can do in the data collection and processing phase is some like early stage, quicker, what we would call discount usability testing. So you can do a usability assessment, like an expert review in Google Notebook, but you can do this with any tool that you can point a URL at or take screenshots of. You take a picture or point your LLM at the browser and ask it what potential usability issues exist. And it will do a heuristic evaluation or a usability audit for you. It's not perfect, but I like doing this after I've done my own audit, because sometimes it catches a thing or two that I overlooked, or that I'm like, yeah, I could add that to the list. And so it's heuristic evaluation. Similarly, you can point it at a website and it will do a heuristic evaluation of this website. Some of it you may agree with, some of it not. So you're still the expert in, that would need to be assessing whether you agree with its assessment. But it will do an assessment, and you can use that as input. So that's all collection. Now we're into analysis. So actually, once you've run a study. So data analysis, there are automated analyses that you can get from a lot of tools. So I want to show you some examples. This is what Userology will do. It gives you a usability score and tells you why. It gives you an overview. It gives you some ratings by task. It gives you a transcript. And it's quite comprehensive on the qualitative side. it doesn't exactly lend itself nicely to like a nice polished report for stakeholders, but it gives you as a researcher who just ran this study good context for something that you otherwise didn't observe and didn't watch the video from. In this case, userology will give you qualitative, quantitative, and let you ask questions in an LLM chatbot. I really like this overview of the qualitative finding where it gives you all the counts for like what happened and who expressed things or who ran into challenges. That is so annoying to have to go through and do, even if it's 25 participants, and they were an hour each. If you only watch them once at regular speed, that's 25 hours of your life watching user videos. And trust me, if you're doing counts, you're not watching them just once. So like to be able to get all of these counts in a blink of an eye is so nice. It also does some quantitative stuff like time on task. That's huge because if you're doing benchmarking or anything like that, that is hard to gather. Completion rate, again, another one that's like you can gather that if you're doing something. Misclicks is really interesting on a prototype. That tells you how many, like what your information sent is for your, and like you could run different versions and see which one has fewer misclicks. Usability score is like their own custom thing. And what's interesting is more the details inside there. And then there are some ratings, right? They collect after each task some subjective ratings. And so you can actually get those all rolled up and already aggregated. You don't have to go back and watch the videos or read the transcripts to find out. Outset is another tool that does AI moderation. In this case, I really like what they do. You tell it what questions you want, and then it goes through and does a summary. It does a little graph, and then it gives you these quotes. So you can read the quotes and see all the supporting evidence, and you can filter that. So you can say, just show me the people who rated it an 8 to a 10, show me the people who rated it a 6 to a 7, and then view that and jump into the transcript from there. When it comes to transcripts, synthesizing them is like the bulk of the work that we do in analysis. And there are great ways to do that with LLMs. So in this case, Gemini or Notebook or Claude or ChatGPT, you can give them those files and ask them to find you content. It's great. You can ask for a timeline of a person's experience or an aggregated timeline of everyone's experience. And then you've got like the beginnings of some journey mapping. If you had something with more quantitative data in it, you can also get graphs and visualizations. It will write the Python code and run the stats. You want to check its code. Make sure it did the analysis correctly, but it's well commented code. So even if you don't write Python, if you have basic coding familiarity or basic statistical familiarity, you can read the code's comments and glean what's happening and understand if it did the analysis correctly, and then it will generate the graphs. This is my personally new favorite way to get a box and whisker plot, because you can't get those in Excel. Another tool that I'm a big fan of is a tool that has sort of is a great example for two reasons. One, it's a quantitative analysis tool called Add Maple. It's for exploring quantitative results, but it has AI elements. And I think what it does really nicely is that it incorporates AI in the right places. So here I'm doing quantitative analysis, it's doing statistics. None of this has AI, and that's okay. But I can say, give me an explanation for what I'm looking at, and it will give me my talking points. Now, do I need an explanation for this graph? Maybe not, but does it get me started on my report? Yeah. Alternatively, here, the stats column, this is again, just it running the stats. It's not doing anything with AI, but it's still very helpful. what I really like here is that it's integrated where it's best suited, where AI is best suited to help you. And another example of that that's even, oh, there is another example of it doing open tagging that will, open coding that we'll get to in a minute. Open coding and open tagging, or qualitative tagging or coding is, or thematic analysis as another name, is something that everyone wants LLMs to be better at, and they're not yet. I have not yet found an LLM that does, you can feed it a CSV file and it will appropriately categorize that stuff. So far, they're all still pretty bad. But at Maple, if you want to get fancy and write scripts, you can get them to do it, because what you do in that case is you process each blurb, each sentiment separately in an LLM, and that's how you get it to do it. But if you have a CSV file, there is no way that I have found to just feed it the CSV file and have it process them individually and generate an output at in a reliable fashion. It's been messy. But at Maple, you know, it does. So a manual approach works, right? You can hand code these and then graph them, but it doesn't scale. Add Maple will identify the codes and then apply the codes appropriately. And then you can go back and review them all and tweak them and change them and fix them if necessary. In this case, I fed it, these are alternatives to shopping at Walmart. And the question was like, where else do you shop and why? So it's qualitative text. It's a paragraph of answers, of a descriptive answer. And I asked the AI to identify all of the stores that were named. And it did. It knew what a store was, it knew what it meant, and it found all the names, generated a list, and then I said apply codes, and it boom went through and found them all. And it did it in 3 minutes. I was done, including reviewing the output. So much faster than this, which took me for 35 respondents, took me half an hour. And I'm fast with a spreadsheet. This is what it looks like when you're reviewing the contents. I'll also mention, and I didn't mention this before, it was in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. So I couldn't really have very quickly read these. Like I could have looked at this and been like, okay, Cheddar. Okay, I think that's a store in Mexico. But like, or El Zupo, like I know that's a store in Mexico, or Supo del Rio, Supered del Rio. But like, I'm not fast at identifying the store names. And I'm gonna make mistakes because I don't know what I'm reading. If I translate them, I run the risk of losing context. I run the risk of not having the right language, the right label, the right names of the stores. But AdMaple did it with its AI feature in Spanish for me in 3 minutes. And I could go through and say, oh, this one here or that one here, and like fix them, right? Anyways, there are also special analysis tools that I just want to touch on as we're coming to the end. So this is one called Reveal that you pose questions after feeding it transcripts or video files, actually. And it will do study level analysis as well as individual analysis. So in this case here, this is respondent 66. It answers each question for respondent 66 here. And then it gives me at the study level what people said it had in common as well as contradictions. And I really love the contradictions column because that's where you get like the interesting nitty gritty of like, not everyone said this. There's texture here. CoLoop is another tool that does something similar. I really like it. CoLoop has a segmentation feature where I can say I gave it all the data from the US and Mexico. So, and the Mexico ones are in Spanish. And then I said, tell me the answer for my US participants, tell me the answer for my Mexico participants, and aggregate at that level. So all the Mexico participants, what did they say as a group, as a cohort? And this is sort of its output. So I really like its ability to do that. Reveal also does something I like, which is hypothesis testing. So here I said, this is the hypothesis. Respondents prefer to shop in store. It said there are things that people say is true. Each participant, and then there's some contradictions. And then for each participant, it goes through and says yes, 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 no, not enough information. And it will give you one of those three outputs. So here is a no, right? This participant does not prefer to shop online for local pickup. And I love that. So there's tools out there that are like tailored for analysis using AI to generate the findings, and then you dig in and explore and go deeper on your own to validate. That's all analysis. Insight generation, we're going to go through quickly. This is sort of like the next level of analysis. This is where you're not just scratching the surface, but you're generating more valuable insights. Things like, I just fed you transcripts. What are the product opportunities that are emerging? Or what are the unmet needs described in these interviews? It's quite good at answering those kinds of bigger questions. Again, you want to validate the answers and make sure you agree with its sources and citations. Another trick I like is asking for an SCR formatted presentation. SCR is an acronym for Situation Complication Resolution. It's a McKinsey formula. If you're familiar with the McKinsey accounting or like consulting group, it's the McKinsey consulting formula. So it's tried and true. And you just say, write an SCR formatted outline for a presentation on what these interviews, raw data, transcript data said. And it will give you an outline. And you want to make it your own, but it will get you started. You can also ask it to do personas. It's a pattern recognition machine. So if you feed it transcripts, it will do its best to find patterns. Depending on what kind of data you have in the interviews, those the similarities that it finds may or may not be helpful or useful to your stakeholders. And that's where you want to be more directive about what to cluster on, or what dimensions you want people, your personas, to vary or differ on. So like, that's, your mileage may vary, but it is still a very interesting approach to, if you're trying to do persona or profile development, to see what patterns or groups the LLMs are finding, because they are very good at pattern recognition. Another one I like is here, it's based on these interviews, develop a marketing message. What this is doing is allowing you to take your research and expand your stakeholder group to marketing, which may not be a group that you typically know how to extend your findings to support. So it extends the value and the utility of your research. It also helps you speak your different stakeholders' language. What you see here is like, this is your product pitch. And these 4 bullet points right here. This app allows you to track your symptoms and identify potential triggers. This is a digestive disorder set of interviews. So like people with Crohn's disease and IBS and things like that. Receive personalized recommendations, access evidence-based information, connect with healthcare providers. Those are your value propositions. You can take that, turn around and go run something like a MaxDiff or like some sort of concept validation study and see who responds to those and how excited they are by those 4 value propositions. And like, if you're a startup and you don't have a marketing team, like, that's even more helpful. Or you take this to your marketing team and say, we think this is gonna be the things that we can convey about our product that will sell and resonate with people, please test that out in like a marketing sphere. So that's insight generation. And then a few things just as we're wrapping up on reporting. It can be a writing coach. Dan mentioned that at the beginning, right? That a lot of people use it to help them write or edit their writing. You can also take a full report you wrote, like the big, full, giant report, and ask it to generate a presentation for you. Or take a presentation and that's more detailed and generate it for a different audience. So you can consider who your target audience is, and you want to consider the goal or the topic of the presentation. So you can reuse raw data, or when I say raw, I mean like transcripts, right? You can reuse your PII scrubbed transcripts, or you can use a detailed report and have the LLMs help you with like structuring presentations and you're structuring your thoughts. It will also, if you're in a hurry, you can ask Gemini to generate the VBA code, which is Visual Basic Application Code, for the slide deck. It will give you all the titles and all the text for each slide. And then you paste that in to the VBA module in the developer section of not the online version, the desktop version of PowerPoint, and hit run, and then it goes like this, whoop, and it goes slide, content. It's ugly. It's white on text. It's black text on white backgrounds. But PowerPoint has some very nice, like, design this slide for me buttons, and you can get a workable presentation rather quickly, that you can then spend your time crafting the narrative and getting it exactly right, not typing basic content in. So the idea isn't that you just ship it when you get there, when you get something on the slides. The idea is that you then spend the time to make it even better instead of spending the time on the like data entry. You can also have it generate accompanying images for slide decks, posters, etc. Again, Gemini in particular is just atrocious when it comes to text. But if you're using Midjourney, not bad. ChatGPT's newest version is also not as bad when it comes to text. They kind of fixed the glitch there, which is great. But it's a place to start, especially if you need something that is more tailored and or demonstrates a particular point that you can't find an image for, or you can't find an image that's that with the acceptable licensing. So that's reporting. I mentioned a lot of tools. I have a list in the slide deck. And with that, we are done.
Excellent. Excellent.
I know that was a lot.
Questions for Andrea?
Yeah.
While you're thinking of your questions, I have a quick comment. We could not have done this presentation 3 years ago. I mean, the tools that Andrea was talking about are just impressive as hell. They do things, for example, the open coding thematic analysis thing that she discussed. I cannot tell you how many hundreds of person hours I have invested in that.
Me too.
Probably thousands, truthfully. But it's the kind of thing where if it went from, say, 100 hours down to 1 hour, that's an enormous savings. Also, the fact that it's much more complete, or you can do these studies in multiple languages and different groups. It's just, as a long-time user experience researcher, this is phenomenal progress. So let me open it up for questions here.
Yeah.
I'm going to change the slide. Anybody have a question? Go ahead, shout it out.
Are there any ways to double check the information this tools gives regarding the users, like these issues with hallucinations and everything, which are in just consumer-facing products? Are there somehow better coped with in this type of products? to be sure that if in the summary it shows that person A said something that it really happened and not was made up?
Yeah. So you get to know the tools that you have access to. And that's really the biggest limitation for a lot of us right now is I just showed you all these tools. No one person has access to all of them unless you're in the business that I'm in, which is AI UX research tool consulting. And so you get to know your tools. So in the case of Notebook, which is accessible to many, it cites your details. So if I find, I'm going to pull up an example of Notebook. And share and then share my screen. Here we go. So in the example of Google Notebook, I went through and said discover, told it I wanted to know what did I want? I wanted resources on.
Andrea, could you magnify that a little bit?
Yes, let me see what I can do. Yeah. What I wanted were resources on, these resources are resources on how Gen Z does banking. And so Google Notebook found them for me, and then I looked at each one and picked the ones that came from places like NatWest Group and YouGov that I trusted. There were some that I was like, I trust that resource. Once I'm in here, I ask it a question, and it cites its sources. So, for example, the rise of digital-first banking is heavily influenced by Gen Z's preference for convenience and advanced digital capabilities. Here is the resource where it's talking about this, and if I click on it, it jumps to the section where it talked about that. So I can read this and double check that I agree with that sentiment. If you're using something different, that's like transcripts. Do I have one of those? Let me, 1 second. I might have one where I have transcripts. Like a bunch of transcripts.
This is what a UX researcher looks like when she's working.
With my mouth open, like, ah. Anyways, so I could feed it transcripts and it will, and when I ask it for something, it will jump to that point. So you want to get to know your particular products. If you're using a generalized LLM like Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, I ask it to quote and cite the source. What I then do is I open the transcripts as text files and I do a search to make sure that that quote fits, that it finds it, that it didn't make it up or munge it and change it in some way that isn't appropriate, and that I check its context to make sure I agree with the use and the interpretation of that quote. So where you are going to spend your time, more of your time, is in the validation. That is absolutely true. But it depends on the tool, how and where and when you'll do that. And then there's also just times when manual analysis is appropriate. If the context is very sophisticated or very nuanced, that's in particular a time. Yeah, so there's two things that you're touching on. One is the problem with transcription. Even in a human moderated interview, when it gets transcribed, you may lose the fact that that person was being sarcastic. So that's true just with transcription, whether a human moderated the study or not. When you're doing with an AI moderator, one thing I'll note is that people tend to not signal things like sarcasm with their voice because it's a computer and it's lost on them. People are aware that they're not talking to a person, and so they don't flag as many social signals. The other thing that you'll run into is that people do not have the tolerance for an hour-long interview with an AI moderator. So they need to be more concise. They need to be shorter. That is true. I'd say 20 minutes, you're pushing 20 minutes, 30 minutes if you're really lucky. But like a 20-minute interview is really what I would cap it at for an AI moderated study. If it's a human, you can like build rapport and do things to keep that person engaged more so than you could with an AI moderator. So there are differences. But what I would suggest is consider the AI moderator an improvement on an unmoderated study, not a replacement for human moderated studies. In general, I would recommend conducting some of your interviews yourself to begin with, to refine your protocol, refine your script, build a sense for what that data may contain, and then scale with an AI moderator. Run it in other countries or collect more data faster, right, with the AI moderator. But you can combine that with your own human moderated studies. Or in the case of like an AI moderated study, it's better than an unmoderated study. And if you want if you want to run a survey and all you have are open-ended questions, that's like you're going to get a terrible response rate, and the quality of those typed answers is going to be terrible. But an AI moderated study is effectively what that is. It's a verbal survey but it has more dynamic response to what you've said, and that's where you get better compliance. Because if someone doesn't answer the question, the AI will ask it again. Or if they only answer half the question, the AI will follow up and ask, well, what about the second part? And that's where I think you get better data quality than an unmoderated study or a survey. Which part is the most challenging? It depends. So there are clients I have whose major pain point is that they don't have a way of getting their videos transcribed. But in general, what I would say is the thing that takes researchers the most time is the analysis phase, is the reading all the transcripts or watching all the videos and finding those patterns and developing your hypotheses and testing and evaluating those hypotheses and doing the like pattern data recognition process. Like that's just work. And you can really get you can get started and into the details very quickly with an AI with an AI helping you develop those theories and doing some of that analysis and identifying the themes. And then where you spend your time is in finding the appropriate evidence and understanding the nuance and the context and really digging in on that. Or you also spend your time on making it useful to stakeholders, making sure that it's having the impact on decision making that you want it to have. And so you can spend your time. I don't like to say that it makes you faster at research. It gives you more time to spend on the more important, more impactful parts of research.
Sorry, just a follow-up.
If I have like a survey file. With a CSV file, it tends to be like a very large structured data file, right? So it's like a survey.
Yes.
And doing that analysis in Excel or in a spreadsheet type of way is not great. And not everyone can afford an SPSS license or can code in R or Python to do this statistical analysis. And so I find there's like a great workflow with something like ChatGPT or Gemini where you give it the CSV file and it has to be well described. You have to have like actually the text of the questions and the headers and things like that, so that anyone can make sense of the file. But if you've got a well-described data file, all of a sudden you can ask ChatGPT, what's this survey what are the topics that this survey covers? And then you can even ask it questions. Like, my favorite example was there was a survey about it's open source data about developers and people who do software development. And it's a large scale survey from GitHub, all about your background, where you learned, how you learned, what you do for fun as far as coding goes, how much you're paid, where do you work, what things do you like about your job, what kind of benefits do you value, etc. And it interviewed students, it collected data from students, it collected data from professionals of all different areas all around the world. And I was able to very quickly ask ChatGPT, what's this survey about? It gave me an overview. I said, great. What are the top 10 things that are different between male and female respondents? It first knew what the gender column was, determined how to determine male versus female respondents. I simplified it because that particular survey had a very complex schema for gender. And then ran all of the other analyses, all of the other survey questions to determine which ones had the largest difference or gap between the male and female respondents. And then it surfaced the top 10 to me. Do you know how much work that would have been if I had to do all that analysis by hand? That would have been days, because that survey had like 200 questions in it. So I would have had to do a lot of exploratory data analysis to find out the top 10, and then sort to find the top 10 differences, right? Another example I said in that survey was, for students, what's the stack rank of valued employer benefits? So which benefits do students say they appeal to them about jobs in the software development field? Free lunch, holiday, not working nights and weekends, stock options, you name it. They had like everything under the sun in that list. And not only did it filter down to students, identify the correct question that was topically relevant to about benefits, and do that analysis, it aggregated or combined and collapsed similar benefits, like not having to work nights and not having to work weekends, and deduped the respondents.
So, Andrea, I'm gonna summarize. I want to wrap this up here. So, can you
Sure.
give me a short answer to that?
I'll do my best.
Question. What was the most problematic part of this analysis step for you? Did I get that right? Yeah.
Problematic in terms of time, or like
I think quality.
validity concerns.
Validity, yeah. With the tools.
Using a regular LLM, the temperature is higher, and and they're more likely to hallucinate. Using a research specific tool, they turn the temperature on those way, way down, and they very specifically, like Notebook, will only ever cite stuff from your sources. And so if you're using a regular LLM, the biggest concern is validity and reliability.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to have to quit now. Let's thank Andrea again for staying up past midnight.
It's been a while since I pulled a semi all-nighter. It's lovely to see you all.
It It was great, Andrea. Thank you so much. If you send me the link to that userology video, the one you tried to show, because we
It
weren't
is-
getting the audio, just send it to me and we'll show it tomorrow.
Okay, it is linked in the slide deck, but I'll send you the link to the
Okay.
to that
Then I
particular
should be
video.
able to do that. All righty, great. Thank you so much.
Of course,
I'm
thanks
going-
everyone.
Great. Thanks, everybody. You can drop off now. I have one more slide to do, but thanks so much. Okay.
Good night or morning.
There you go. That's what you were waiting for, wasn't it? So while you're filling this out, I'm going to provide a little bit more background. Andrea and I worked together at Google for a long time, and we both had many chances to do lots of the steps she was talking about. Everything from study planning to production to all this, everything through analysis and generating insights and communicating results to partners. All of those, as she just pointed out, just got a lot better. The notion that I could run studies in Mexico, Brazil, and the US and India all simultaneously is just, that would have been super expensive and taken a lot of time. So this is very, very much a new age for user experience research. But as she said at the very beginning, it's important that you still keep your good researcher hat on. Do not, under any circumstance, report 6 results out of 12 saying yes, as 50% of respondents said this is true. Don't screw up the statistics just because you can get them faster, right? So make sure you have an adequate sample size, you have adequate power in your statistics, all the classic things you still have to be to do good research. All righty, I'll see you all tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you.